First of all, I think we are blinded by this spotlight. Thank you all for your attendance here today to our seminar. We really hope you enjoyed. How many here in the room? How many have you played around with IPv6? Good. All others just come here to see what's the fuss about it, right? Well, before we get started and yield the floor to the master's Rafa Sánchez. He works for Telefónica and I work for another company, but just the same. We have a stand downstairs, and if you're interested, you're welcome to chat. Gemma will be with us, by the way, tomorrow, and there you can get to know what we are. You can leave your resume with us, and we will have to please stand up. 2 colleagues that will be there waiting for you. Good. So let's get started with this seminar. We only have 2 hours and we have to rush through it. So Pablo asked who has been playing around with it. But first, who heard about IPv6 at least? At the very least, all of you. Well, good. So, I have a question myself. We all know what drones are, right? Don't we? Those flying things on a helix. And we know that there's been a law passed recently to regulate the use of drones, just fostered by the Ministry of Defense. The idea would be to regulate its use for safety and security reasons. That's good, right? Because that's been ahead of problems before something wrong happens. It is regulated and we know who can use it and how. I don't know why, but on the internet and for these internet-related securities, not the same rule applies. We work on security when things have already happened, and with the IPv6, it's more or less the same. We've all heard about it, we know it's been deployed, we know it's being used, but still no one is playing around with it. No one is looking into detail. Well, of course there are a few people, but not so many. And so we see it as not interesting from the point of view of security. So, what we want to do this afternoon is encourage you all. First, we'll explain how IPv6 is more prevalent than you might have thought, and then we want to encourage you to do some research. Briefly, what we'll do today, we'll have a short introduction to IPv6. Maybe you've heard about it, but it's always useful to have a short intro to the most technical items. And then this wonderful idea or sentence that it's be the leader, and we'll explain why the leader. Then we'll have a test environment. This is a seminar, so we'll have real life testing, and we'll be using 16.4 tunnels. I don't know if you heard about them, but yet are very useful and practical when starting playing around with this protocol. Then we will use a virtual private server, VPS, that's what it stands for. And then we will generate a series of packages, and we'll do so manually with IPv6. We'll have a very simple ping and then also simple scanning, and then we'll move on to attacks. We will have all those that you see on the screen, and those will significant because for the last one are also applicable to the IPv4. So SYNFLIRT, TCP scan, and then NPD exhaustion attack is just specific to IPv6. So what's the point, or what's IPv4 useful for? I guess all of us, we are technicians to some extent, and we understand that IPv4 is just simply to transfer, or let me rephrase, to send information and packets using 32 bits packets from one point to the next on the internet. And so we can use and redirect some 4.3 billion IP addresses, which are many, lots of them for the allocation of a public IP address. But for some time now we've known that it was not enough to have an IP address for each item on the internet. So we have the NAT, the NATE, we have it at home for redressing. We all know what it is about. Here we see a series of examples of an IPv6 addresses. You see them all on the screen. You see the 0 or the 01 equivalent for IPv4. And it's important to remember what the network address is. We will have a short graph or a detailed graph to see and understand how the IPv addresses allocation works. Let me now discuss a few other things. We will not dwell on technical ideas, but we just want to have a general idea of what an IPv6 address is and how we can have this addressing. Here we've got the hexadecimal characters or figures. That's a way to have a simplified version of an IPv6 address. I had a joke and see who here can come out here and give me an IPv6 address. Although you're all part of the technical world, this is no news to you, but probably most of you will have trouble trying to write that because are very difficult to handle it manually. Anyone dares come here and do so? Good, come here. Do not use a local host, okay? I see what your intentions are here. Okay, this is probably one of his servers, so take note of that address. Well, that could be it. Good. So a round of applause for him. There's just a slight mistake. It's out of curiosity. I would like to say that it cannot start with a 1 because it's a 2 to start then. Then we usually have a 2 or 8, depends. But just like this, it will be perfect. This way you've had earned yourself a t-shirt as a reward. What he's done, silly as it might seem, I think it helps you understand that people don't know what IPv6 protocol is about. How many? 7, 8? Oh, good, very good. As we were saying, it's all about zeros and ones, and you see the large amount of those that we have for an IPv6 address, totaling 128 of them, so we can forward all this number of addresses, which is a huge amount. Here then, what's important would be the same as a network address for IPv4, the equivalent. We know that part of that address would be the network address and then the host address. Here we call it prefix for IPv6, that's the network address, and then forwarding or routing, the same for IPv4 and IPv6. The first 4 blocks, 2001, ODV8, AC, 10, FE01, this represents here the network address for IPv6. And then in order to have a proper realistic writing, here we would have a slash, number of bits that match the network address, usually 64 of them. Here it would be a slash 64 then. Addresses, more addresses. In the end, all that amount of flow and jets of zeros and ones, well, what means is, or comes to mind is, a large amount of addresses, right, that we can get with this quantum leap to IPv6, and it's difficult to picture it. People have trouble trying to picture how many addresses we can have. This graph can be misleading. Here you can see IPv6 addresses, and you see on the left side we have IPv6 addresses, then number of IPv4 addresses. And it is exponential. It's not 3-4 times higher than IPv4, but it is exponential growth, because if you see the column next to IPv6, it says number of atoms on Earth. So on the Earth, and this is a larger number. But you see the difference between IPv6 and the number of atoms doesn't seem so large. And then you have the 2012 figures here, so it's a bit outdated, but yet I think I made the odds and did the odds, sorry, and I guess that for each atom on the Earth crust would get IPv6 address with the routing that we have available. So whenever we discuss forwarding or redressing of this, it's not about 256 host / 24 anymore, but it is / 64, and that's what we all get when we get the IPv6 connection at home, and we will manage an amount of hosts that you cannot even picture right now. It will blow your minds. as I said already, usually, so to say, depending on the access type that we have available for IPv6, the standards or standardizing bodies for the internet would recommend or set that the minimum should be allocated to an end user. It would be /64, so half of the bits are address, the network address, and half of it is the host address. People might think 64 bits, that's a lot for redressing, will have too many, but this is a hot discussion. There was a hot discussion. I had trouble picturing it at first, but yes, we will have plenty of them, and for a long time, even when you have the Internet of the Things and everything else, we'll have plenty of them. How many addresses am I wasting at home? No problem there. And then there was a company or maybe an operator or someone come give you a /56, not so many bits for network address, but a few more bits for your own addresses, because from 56 to 64 you've got bits for sub networks plus a /64 at home, and then extra /64, and then you would get also /48. That large amount of figures or numbers, that's the redressing available for each case, you see. So I think the first one, which is /64, it's some 18 quintillions for IPv6 addresses. And then, as I said, when we started, be the legion, well, that's the sentence or phrase. We as hackers, we always think it through. We always find or try to find an underlying meaning or hidden meaning to everything. We try to touch every button in every keyboard, and it seems that there will be some attacks or tricks such as these, where this redressing might end up being a security problem in some scenarios. As I said, we will be focusing on /64, which are the two IPv6 accesses that we will have for our tests. And as I was saying, this is beautiful or shocking. Yes, you see, we've used it over and over again, but this is something, though, that when you approach the topic or you discuss IPv6 for the public, people don't understand it. So let's try and see how this can be understood. Something else that is paramount for IPv6 and easy to understand as well, and still not so easy to grasp consequences here, and that would be NAT. We all know what NAT is, right, Nat? Can you explain it to me? That's pretty simple, isn't it? Straightforward. Volunteers? Are you saying hello to each other, or are you volunteering? Up there. There was a volunteer up there, right? Do we have a handheld microphone in the room? That's a chair, I would say. You'll know it, right? There's no reward. I don't know, a beer tops. Next year, maybe. Network. Now, I want you to explain to me what it's all about. I have routers for ADSL or fiber access at home, and we have a router with an NAT. What does it mean? That it translates what? Well, IPs. Yes, IP addresses. Perfect. But why? Why? And you will hit it. Because at home, we have private IP addresses that wouldn't be accessible from the internet. Yes, you nailed it.
A explicar aquí adelante. Entonces, por eso se traduce una dirección.
So from the translation booth, we are not sure whether someone's listening. If someone's listening, please raise your hand to let us know. Otherwise, we will close the microphone. Turn it off. No? No one? Could you please raise your hands if you're listening to the English translation? Anyone? No?
La izquierda no es accesible desde internet, este famoso 192.168, siempre que vemos un 192.168 significa que esa dirección no puede salir a internet, porque no te la van a rutar, no por nada, sino porque va a llegar un elemento de nivel superior en internet y te lo va a cortar, ¿vale? Por mucho que lo intentemos.
So, we will resume just for the streaming. So in order to get out of the internet, we have this address translation. But what about the IPv4? If we have an outside element that is on the internet, such as host C, as we see on the screen, that has a 210.33.5.1 address and wants to connect to that element, how do we do so? So that's what happens. It stops. And then we will introduce this idea. Is it NAT a security mechanism? Is it not from this point of view, this approach? Are we really guessing the direct traffic from the internet to my servers or machines? Well, there is also quite a hot discussion on the topic. It is also quite controversial, and it applies to the IPv6 as well. And why is that? Because this is not the case for IPv6. Well, initially, but neglecting all the 5-word rules that we can have on the router, and that's the in-between thing we have there, all the redressing is public. It is accessible from the internet. But there's just one exemption, that it's the gen local. If you've played around with it, with the IPv6, you're familiar with this. It would be a redressing that will not be used for anything else on the internet. It will be only local environment and just for specific tasks, network tasks for a very limited environment. All the IPv6 redressing and the underlying idea, and that's what it was designed, and that's why the public body said everything will be done like this. No more NAT. We only want point-to-point connection. Why? Because it's a very good idea. That way we get end-to-end visibility. And had it been like that from the beginning, we would have saved us so many pains and headaches to service developers who need the connection to come from the outside, say Skype. From my end-user PC, I want to have a communication with another end-user PC, and designers had to come up with a series of services and intermediate elements so that there would be a communication, so that from my PC I can send a final message to another computer elsewhere. Here, these bodies would say, well, let's find a simpler way, because we designed them ourselves, 128 bits, and so everyone has public addressing. Let's forget about NAT. For very exceptional cases, we will put forward NAT, but initially we don't want it, we forget about it, so let's get rid of it. And then we will see what it means, what it involves. But initially we will have access from my PV6, public IPv6 address to another public IPv6 address. These graphs are very beautiful, aren't they? These are from some 2-3 years ago, 2013, but they're good, aren't they? Here we see one of the many attempts to try and picture and map the internet. There are several internet-based projects that want to draw the mesh for the internet and see the different hierarchies and connection levels and links. On the left side you can see what's the internet for IPv6, and on the right side that's internet on IPv6 that was back in 2013. Not so bad, still some differences, but in the end these graphs in a nutshell means that you've got on the core center you have the higher levels, higher tier, and that's the core of the network. We see intercommunication amongst autonomous systems, and if you are familiar with these internet terms, well, you can think that those are ISPs, which are internet providers, and even countries communicating to each other, and then traffic would be a bit more hierarchical. You see each packet it's sent to the outside till it reaches end users, so to say. As for IPv6, it seems that it follows its own path. Actually, the concept would be just the same, the organization and equipment, everything is the same, networks are the same, and yet the entitlement is different to have it backed up. But it seems those are two different internet, that they are separated or apart, and it seems that people, when trying to understand what the IPv6 is and how it's been deployed, they might think they are a bit more disconnected than they actually are. Actually, the internet, I would conceive it like this. I would say it is a huge mesh of those tiny tentacles reaching out to every corner, and each color stands for a different type of network. IPv6 would be blue, light blue, which is actually shows that everything is intertwined more than we would have thought, and we will see that in a minute. And then another question, or pending question rather. When some of my friends come to me and I say, well, I will be doing a presentation on IPv6 or seminar this weekend, and first they come to me and say, you, pal, still that? That's unavoidable. People might think, it's a long way ahead of us. But yeah, these countries that are so non-significant, just such as the US, Germany, Belgium, Switzerland, but 20% of traffic for Google in those countries or visits to Google is already IPv6 based. And as Google says, well, if they do it, they might be right, and they have the information. 20% is not a negligible amount at all. 20% of my money in the bank is quite an amount for me, and I think the same goes for the internet. This is another piece of news from a few months back. I don't know if you develop phone apps. Do you know a developer in the room? Yeah. Have you heard of this? Apple? You might have heard of it. Well, at a given point, they decided that for their next operating system, which is iOS 9, they will make it mandatory for the apps developed by developers to their operating system. They need to have IPv6 support. They require IPv6 support. And there you've got one of their people. I probably cannot read it, it is small print, but you see that we've exhausted the IPv4 addresses, and the key carriers are developing IPv6 networks, and so it is critical, it is paramount for the company. It has to be IPv6 compatible, it has to have that support. And here we see another slide, and based on what they used for one of the Apple's events, developers events, there you see how he was trying to explain this. It was kind of an introduction. You need to have an IPv4 server, another one which is IPv6, and there are two different networks, but applications need to be in communication with both. And they also said something else. OS X, for the new versions, it allows to set up hotspots, which are Wi-Fi spots in the end, supporting just IPv6 accesses, and that's not cloud there. There's a translation from your device, and even on the right side, which is home, you only have IPv4 access. But I say, for my developers to learn at once what IPv6 is about, so that they play around with it, and so they are connected with the IPv6 on iOS X, I will let them try this out and have their own hotspot that it's only compatible with IPv6, which only has IPv6 support, which is cool. And what can happen? It can come down, it can crash if it also stores variables, and if they are only ready for IPv4, if you're using APIs that are only IPv4 based, and if you're using those APIs that can only be supported by IPv4. So other checks that you can have for your own apps, such as checking whether the device has an IPv4 address set up. You do so and it will crash, because if it's not IPv6 supported, well, it will crash, and that's something Apple doesn't like. What about if they get to an address? It will crash and break as well. So it gave me some food for thought. If Apple says so, I guess they should be right? If they're using one of these events, which is one of the most important events for any developer in the world, there's competition out there. that means that it's worth paying attention to that. It is the largest company in the world. We all know that, and so we need to do something. I will now give the floor to Pablo, and he will explain a few more interesting things.
Okay, you've gone ahead of yourself. Let's set up the scene, and I'm gonna tell you about this tunnel 6 in 4. Out of those of you who have answered yes to the questions about IPv6, have you worked with tunnels? Can't really see you. There's somebody at the back. Well, this might be of interest to you then, because when we started working with this, Rafa is the one who has expertise in this topic, and I was the apprentice, and I like playing with IPv6 a lot, and the setting up of the tunnel seems quite interesting, because it's very easy for you at home to be able to set up a machine. For instance, a Kali Linux that I've asked you, you've used it, I'm sure, and you played around with it. So we're going to set up a Kali Linux in a virtual machine in this equipment, and Rafa has that ready. Internet, both in version 4 and version 6, and then we will hire an IPv6. What's the price? Very expensive, below €2 a month. Yeah. VPS, that you can have internet, but I've had to pay more for the beer that I've just drank. So we have the virtual private, the VPS, and we have it connected to version 4 and another one to version 6. And why is that important? Because at home, you probably, your supplier does not give you access to IPv6. It's true you can have the home computer ready to set up the IPv6 interface, but the router, when it takes it out, the provider is probably going to shut that down. So we have to use some channel to be able not really to encapsulate, because it's not really that, but it's we're going to take our datagram, our packet IPv4. It's like introducing it inside that our IPv6, and we send that through internet. But for that we need a central element that takes that information, removes the version 4 part and leaves the version 6 part, and this is the element that we use for that. This is a broker, and the cost of registering and then getting access to that tunnel broker is 0. So we have to add up €2 a month for the VPS and the €0 for the brokers. But it's true that you have to be careful what you do, because they can ban you easily, don't they? Well, this morning there was a bit of a panic because we were banned. So we've opened up 2 accounts just in case. Well, 2 by 0, it's still 0. So what we're going to do with this Kali Linux is to connect to the broker, and we have to set up a new interface, but you'll see it's very simple, and the endpoint will be the broker, but that will be for the IPv4 traffic, and the IPv6 will be inside the IPv4. So in that broker, with our account, it will take it and it will readdress it. So we move from IPv4 to IPv6. So the result, if we're able to do that, is something like this. Although Rafa will complain, are you all clear about the fact that the traffic, the IPv6 traffic is encapsulated within IPv4? Okay, so this is the scene. And the NAT and no NAT that Rafa has discussed earlier, this is what he's talked about. It is true that we have the NAT issue, but the machine from the IVPS through the broker, we're going to be able to get to this machine over here. So we can do the reverse connection from there to here, and that's quite interesting. We would be going above everything to do with NAT, or bypassing it. Shall we talk about this now? To see real things already? First of all, if we want to explain the interfaces, well, the interface that you can see here, the net assist, as we've called it, this is, here it says NCAP, is the one that will take the IPv6 and within the packet, IPv4 is going to address it. And where? Can we show the commands? Well, if you want, we can perhaps look at the tunnel provider first. This is one of the suppliers, or the tunnel supplier that we're going to use. Does it work well here? If you know somebody who works in this company, don't get angry. Perhaps some of you have heard about this. You may be familiar with Hurricane Electric, which is better known as, which is more famous. It's more commonly used, but I like this one because it's very easy to use, really easy. You just register. They have something in the register that I don't like in terms of security, and we can discuss that later on, but leaving that aside, this is as simple as that. So we can do a logout through HTTP. So you register the new account, we log in, it's pure HTTP. There's something useful here in Hurricane Electric. What do I do in my machine to use this? Here you have information with the IPv6 addresses. You could just click here on your operating system. FortiGate, how many of you use it? Let's opt for Linux. And it tells you which are the commands that you have to set up in your machine so that it works. If you want to go into more detail, you have to make a small change, and I can tell you later on why, which is to change this parameter here. And why? Because with this command, what you're saying is that you're going to have a tunnel interface that we will call net assist, as Pablo has said, and the remote point is this one, starting by 62 and ending in 12, which is the IPv4. As Pablo has said, we only have access to IPv4. Right now we're going through my mobile phone. I hope it doesn't crash. I have an access point with the mobile phone and then through the computer, and I've had the interface of the virtual box in a bridge mode so that it will get the IP address from my phone. So this is the router and gives access to this PC, and the virtual machine is directly connected to the router. So as I don't have the IPv6 output, I need an internet point in which I can send all the traffic that Pablo has been discussing about. And that internet point, they tell me this is the one. So I say that the remote location that the traffic has to be sent to is to the tunnel interface. And this is what we need to change, because the local point is this one here. This interface here, which is what I wanted to show. And if you can see, this is an internal address. It's very similar to the ones you may have at home. It's an internal address, as we've said earlier on, and it's been assigned by the mobile router. So my commands really are something like that. Here we have an example. I think this is the one I have set up right now. So you just need to change this so that it works. Everything else is just the same. If we go over the commands, again, we see that what we do next is to lift the interface that we have just set up, and then we assign an IP address, IPv6. Here we have to allocate it the range that we've been given. This one here. I've left out the gateway because that's the next point, which is information about where you're going to send this. This is the address. This would be 192, the equivalent to the one you have at home, but in IPv6. And this is also important. What's this? Somebody knows? Are you just shy or? From the mobile machine. Yes, this is the public IP that this phone is connected through to internet. So my traffic, when it goes to internet right now, lives through this IP address. I've used the service of this IP address that I have. If you want to check this at home, I use this one because it's the one that has less noise. There are many more, but often there's a lot of noise there and you sometimes don't even find the address. This is not the same, but this is probably from a test that I've done because my mobile phone changes from IP address. So every time I want to set up a tunnel, I have to change it. This we don't need to see anymore. Can you show the IPv6 one just for a second? Does anybody know? That's a short address. Do you know? Yes. From here to 1, it's just all zeros after the colon, yeah? And you can only cut zeros once, because you may find more address in blocks that will be zeros, but you can cut only once. Okay, so let's get going. I'm just looking for the script. So the first thing we'll do, what do you do to check if you have if you're connected to internet? Well, you type Google, because the bandwidth that Google needs, then my -n, I use it so the server does not do inverse resolution. And now let's see if nothing has crashed. No, there we are. Everything's fine. Well, my mobile phone is 2 years old. That's why. You're familiar with this, aren't you? And this message as well? Okay. Do you think there's a difference between these two interfaces? Do you think you can have the same traffic? In which one am I going to see the IPv6 traffic? In which of the two interfaces do I have to use to see the IPv6 traffic? Those who think it's the first one, raise your hands, please. I'm on the first one. And the second one? Everybody else, okay? Well, it's in both. Is it encapsulated? Okay. I'll give up. Encapsulated. There are some slides about this later on, but maybe you want to go ahead. The first thing I see here, which interface did I use in the end? I ignored your recommendation because I want to see both layers. I said I don't like the word encapsulate because for me that's like within a protocol to include another one. I don't know if you've heard about COVID standards and things like that. Mentally, I find that matches better the idea of encapsulating. But here, I like stacking better when we see scaping and how we generate the packets. An internet packet in the end is just one stack of different protocols, and each protocol has information for the network element that's going to interpret. So we stack them and that's it. For those of you who are not very familiar with this, that first line is just information about the whole packet, which may be more or less useful, but I never read that. This is layer 2, where we include the MAC addresses. As the next one is IP layer, the internal address, which right now is using my Linux virtual machine, and destination is the one we've seen earlier on, starting in 62 and ending at 12. So this travels through internet through the IPv4 network, and it has all of the load. And how do we tell that to all of the intermediaries? With a parameter, which is this one. As you can see, the protocol has a value 29 here and 41 here, and by using that value, what you're saying is that all middle elements, for all of them, this packet and everything below is going to be an IPv6 packet, and that was defined because, once more, the international regulatory bodies of internet, they say we have to make it easier, and that's why they devised this type of thing. And from now on, the IPv6 traffic can be encapsulated within IPv4 with that parameter. So this is for the IPv6. Source our configured IP, and this is the Google IP. And finally, the content of the protocol. The IPv6, remember that we have it configured, the one that ended in 2, and that's why you can identify it. And this is the Google one. And this is just a curiosity. We were checking other things. Who does that to check that you're connected? Nobody does that. This is great. If I had an internet server, I'd do the same thing. I'd look for a keyword, coffee, beep. Who said Apple? No Apple. Well, Facebook. First of all, we've seen that they're fun guys. And then that they have IPv6 and that we can see traffic there. So Google and Facebook are already there. That's interesting to know. Next thing we have is an Nmap. How many of you have used it? Nmap? Did you know that it has a flag for to make IPv6 connections? But before we do the Nmap, let's go in. And if I ask you all to close your eyes, would you do that? No, you won't. Why? Because this is gonna be the VPS console. But I have to introduce the root password, and I'll do a cut and paste. This is what you're familiar with, and I'm going to connect with this to my VPS server that allows me to have a native connection, VPS. The questions have to be done through the microphone, please. While you do the copy and paste, what traffic can you generate? I will see that next. Do you mean the bandwidth? Are you talking about 300 million teras? No. Is there a limit? Of course. Of course, everything has a limit. So you may choose the traffic. Yes, I just want to have that access, and I chose the cheapest one, and the bandwidth I have is ridiculous, but I have nothing else. I just want a fixed IPv4, which is not so easy to get, just to do my test, and then a native IPv6, and that's enough for me. I have no service. Well, it's interesting here, for instance, to set up a honeypot to receive traffic from internet that may be malicious, or for anybody who's interested in this, I think this is a very reasonable price. This is an access exposed to internet without a router behind, without anything, and relatively open.
So, something else you shouldn't do. But still, we can show it, right? Can we? Sure. So close it down, this one. Good. Are we in? If it isn't broken, don't fix it, right? That's what they say. And there you got the network setup. The interfaces have a weird name, VNet. So, virtual network, in the end, it is an underlying host, and there are different jumps and leaps. But the most interesting part is this. You all know it, you can all attack it if you want. There's nothing there, I can tell you. And where else are these here? It has been recorded, right? So, my bad. That one, which is a IPv6 address, and from here you can also go back to Google. Good. And lots of crap here. Sorry to say, this is all crap what I have here. You shouldn't say it out loud, though. Well, no. need to hide it, we just need to fully change it. Let's add something else. Then, here as well, another question. Rather, I want to know whether traffic is coming to me. I don't trust myself, and I want to see if the traffic from the tunnel makes all the way to the machine and IPv6, but I don't have the tool that I want. What else can we use? TCP dumb. I've overheard that. Well, he heard what he wanted to, actually. So, that's the interface, VNet 0, IPv6 traffic, and we have DNS resolution, and that's it. This is one of the hindrances of IPv6. Memorizing addresses is so difficult that we keep on copy-pasting all the time. So we got the reply on this other machine, and here we go. So, if you noticed, you can see how, I don't know if you are used to reading this kind of TCP dumb traffic. It's not so comfy. We don't get so much level of detail, but still, it's a ping. First of all, we see timestamp, and then we've got the protocol, which is lower tier that we got. It would be similar to IPv4, but we don't get any of these addresses. The broker, well, there was a time when they got all this ping traffic into their public IPv4 address. It started with 62 and ended in 12. They removed the outer IPv4 layer and sent the IPv6 layer to the internet, and this listening machine got the traffic in. And so let's start a scanning cycle. And the other way around as well. Good. Let's check it out. Can we do it?
That's the one, yeah? It is important this because we're in the VPS doing the ping to a machine that's behind the NAT, and that matters. As we done that with IPv6, and that's important because if you realize if you could get to your home with the IPv6, the router wouldn't matter. And we will see an attack later on about how to crash the router at home. And with the IPv6, if your router allows for that. You know that I like to break things since I was a child. So the only thing I've done is, first of all, with this command I've checked whether I had activated services in my Kali machine, and I had nothing. This was all empty, and the scanning was going to be a bit boring. So that's why I've started the SSH service. And by default, many operating systems based in Linux do this. Anybody knows what this means? Yes, that's right. They've said that it's listening both in IPv4 and IPv6. So if we could call from outside to the machine through IPv6, we could bypass that router and get to the machine. And the network, our supplier's network, if it should be unroutable. So what happens if I do this? Can you see that? Even the ones at the back? Do you have to zoom it? I think so. This is the most often used program in any talk you give, the zoom it. I want the mic for you so that everybody can listen. So what's going to happen if I do this? I can explain about the parameters. This is so that it doesn't resolve the NS in the IP address on which I'm going to do the scanning, a -PN, so that I do not have the ICM ping to see if the destination is alive. I decide that it's active and I just start the scanning, and -P 2030, I say I want to scan the ports 20 to 30. This is just for you to understand the command. So what's going to happen if I do this? I remind you where we are. This is a VPS, which is in internet, and if you remember, we only have the public IPv4, which is public and set up, and an IPv6 address, which is also public because they're all public. What's going to happen? It won't get there. That doesn't make any sense because this is the internal addressing. This cannot be routed to internet. But perhaps I can do this. You have it up there. Yes, you're right. The Nmap has said, "You bastard, you're doing an IPv6 and you haven't told me." Can you see that? Has somebody understand what's going on here? What has happened? You're bypassing the NAT. Well, the NAT's no longer there. Forget about it. Just forget about it. Right now, from now on, it's connectivity point to point or end to end. In fact, if do you think this is going to work? We don't even need to do that. And we have our net assist here. So far, so good. We see that there is connectivity end to end, and many of you can say that's a step backward because we used to have that 15 years ago with the IPv4 and we connected with a modem, and then you have where did you remove this? And you can zoom it further. Okay, this is the enlargement. So we've seen Nmap, we've seen SSH. Let's move on to attacks, which is what's more fun. You're all familiar with what a scene flood is? But what have you used it for? That type of attack is scene flood, which means flooding with connections and leave them half open and flood a machine. And if you see, we can use a number of machines to send connections without really closing them, and the machine that receives those connections answers with scene ACK, and you can leave the connections halfway and you can flood the machine. The machine's memory, really, and you can also do with that with firewalls and try to crash a company, for instance. If a company is not well balanced in its internet connection, you could make it crash through the protection element like a firewall. You can crash the firewall, and if the firewall falls and if there's no other way out, that may cause the denial of service of the company. At this point, what we are going to do is not a typical scene flood of the IPv4, because you're familiar with that already. You know that in IPv4, we have an IP address, we have an endpoint IP address, and we start sending scene connection, but we only have one IP. And what Rafa was saying earlier on, that we have a /64 to configure it or set up, it's very important particularly in issues of denial, because if I want to pester a company from an IP address, I do scene floods, and they are going to ban you, and the game's over. It's true that you could have a number of bots and different machines in parallel, but they will be banning us over and over. But here at home, in a single machine, we have the possibility of addressing /64, and I can't remember, I think it was a quintillion of addresses. It's 2 to the power of 64, well, whatever. So it's a lot of IP addresses. So we can, from one machine, start configuring or setting up different IPv6 addresses and send these scene connections. We're doing it from a single machine, but the machine that receives those connections, what it views is that I'm having requests from an IPv6 X machine, a Z machine, different machines, although they are within the same machine. So we have automated that through scapping scripts. Are you familiar with Scappy? Well, Scappy is quite fun, quite powerful too. Would somebody dare? Who has used Scappy seriously? There were 3 people who raised their hands. 4 more than that. Okay, let me remove this. Scappy is a software. We focus on the generation of network traffic to generate packets manually, low level packets, modifying all of the protocol parameters that we want, and it's incredibly useful. And we don't need to know in a lot of detail all the protocols, because because it provides default values. And it's as simple as piling up layers. In that famous encapsulated, it's actually stacking. The network protocols are based in TCP/IP protocols, which in turn are based on the OSI model. The Internet protocol, the working of Internet, is based on the lower layer, the physical layer, which is the MAC layer, which is the equivalent to where the MAC addresses of our network card show up. Next, as we've seen earlier on in the WhatsApp capture, we see the IP layer, the Internet protocol, where that includes information about the IP address, the origin and destination, and other values. And like we've seen earlier on, where we say what's the next protocol, and so we pile them up, and it's the same idea. Then we have the TCP UDP, and we're all familiar with that. In this layer, there's information about a type of protocol, TCP or other, or UDP, the source port, destination port, etc. And finally, the application protocol, and there we have all the Mac ones that are very famous and allow internet to work, HTTP, SSL, etc. And when we start doing packets, we have to just mentally follow this approach. We have to start building layer by layer, and I get to wherever I want, and then you send it to the network, and that's as simple as that. We review here what we've said already, a TCP packet, and here we have an IP source address, and then a destination address, and a public address, and then a physical layer with the MAC addresses, the IP layer, and the TCP address. And in this case, it's 443, which is the SSL port, or whatever you want to. So if I do this in Kali, having installed Scapy, would anybody dare to do a packet right here? I'm gonna do a ping, just like. But if we offer a beer, we offer you a beer, really, seriously, if you do it, or a month of VPS. The beer is better, more expensive. Not even with a beer? Okay, we'll drink the beer together. But I don't want to write because you know what happens when you're live. So let's go here. It's all yours.
Pretty simple though, easy to understand, because in the end we are saying as part of IPv6 destination for the IP address, this one, and then once inside, what we are doing is, here we are encapsulating it. It's encapsulating, isn't it? It is just in-house discussion. I sit next to him and I never compile or stack or... No, it's encapsulating, it's okay. And so, you see, this is an ICMP single packet. It is straightforward. I implement it. What we do here is Python, if you've ever used it, it creates a variable called P and allocates the value, or the value as allocated, it's the object that has all the information, and underneath it, Scapy works its magic. Well, the packet. Wait, I think it's better this way. Well, as you can see, I just ask for all the variable to be shown and see how it's been generated or produced. But actually, you see here all the parameters that Scapy fills in automatically. From here upward, that would tantamount to IP layer that we've produced with the first block, And here you see everything having to do with the ICMP protocol. And just out of curiosity, if you check it out, the funniest thing here would be this address. Where is it coming from? Anyone? Because we have not specified it, right? That was source, wasn't it? That was the interface for our machines. Escape is smart, very smart, and said only destination has been set here. So instead of casting them away, well, I cannot send it. So I picture you want to send it from this source IP address. So as our C parameter inside on Escape has this value, and many more things here actually. But nest jitter, those are other IPv6 parameters. And this is version number 6, and here you've got the ICMP protocol versions. I think it was highlighted in type, which is type of message, 128. That changes after IPv4, but this is a value, and 128 it would be the request for IPv6. And just to send it, send one packet, that's all we get. And then, what's here? Well, we see the pink packet we produced, and this one as well, which is the reply. Good. What's the magic here, and why is it so cool? Because actually, you see here, this silly prompt, and yet it's filling everything needed for the packet to be valid, to travel all the way down to the destination, be interpreted there, and get a reply as well from destination, just by adding tiny information, kind of as an idea, an approximation to what we want. We got the ping. Can you see it? It's a ping request, and this machine, this one, and we can send it again. If can I find it? I don't want to re-type it. Right. Oh, this is Kaylee. Just a sec. See that? Funny though, I only get the reply. But this is what's interesting, because this is the reply. We can send a few more, and you see all of them reach destination. So, skip it. It's quite straightforward and good for what we wanted. Then, this here. What about scripts now? As I said before, this has already been discussed, but did we use it? Well, let's do it now. Let's show how it works. Rafa's got them here, same flight. So check out the code here. So this is this chunk here. This one's not working, it's failing. Oh, there. Let's zoom in. But let me add the script directly. You mean copy pasting from Kaylee? No, from where you started. We added it there, right? And Bing and Nano here. Who's using Bing? And you, the rest of you? Oh, that cannot be. We're a different generation, right? Back to the topic. We get the scan, or rather the script for SYN flat, and this is TCP based. We've got this prompt here. We import some libraries in Python, and this is a function or a prompt that has a predetermined attribute, but if we were to use it just like this, the value would be that internal variable, which is 10. We have this function here, where we have a chart set that has different characters from 0 to F. That's hexadecimal. And in the end, we get a number of random characters, and we check it out. That will always have a 4 in it. So, what we will request when we have the source IP formulated, we do know that we have up to 64 for addressing. So we take the last two parts of the, not the last two, but the last 4/64 parts, and we randomize them. So we are generating IPv6 addresses that are random, but as part of our /64, and hence they will be sending SYN packets to the destination machine. So we have on one machine the whole potential for n million IP addresses that will be started and sent to a single IP address. From the other endpoint, the idea is that I'm being scanned and I get connections from different IP addresses. Is it clear? Naturally, this was another discussion we had. If it's started or sent sequentially, which is another way to go about it, well, sequential, the final element might think, or the endpoint might think, this is weird, I get scanned from one IP and the next, but doing this in a randomized way, it means that we get replies ourselves for different IP addresses. Do you get it? And so, it holds great potential in it. Code, as you can see, source IP lies here. We add info run string. Then this prompt needs to be familiar already. It's pretty similar to the one we used before to create the ICDP packet. We will have an IPv6 packet for the destination machine we want to scan. And as you see, whenever I go through the loop iteration, I will set a different source. And then the next TCP stacked on top of IPv6, it's been produced with the destination port, which is specified with an I variable from 20 to 30, because I want to scan the port range between 20 and 30, and the SYN flag. Okay? That's an S. And then escape B fills in everything else. And you can see this is a pretty simple script. It is just about port scanning. It's pretty simple, the same as port scan that has meta-exploits or nmap. This is a simpler scanning, and that's what they do. This is 4 prompts or 5, 6, 8 prompts. Those are it. And that you get a script, and you get random IPv6 addresses to your masks, and they send them towards destination. I don't think I'm forgetting anything. But this attack will be using the same network address for IPv6 addresses, right? So only the banning should be based on network addresses. Good point. Now we understood it. It's pretty simple, straightforward. But that means, are you working? Well, university, wherever you are now, they probably have a firewall, for your internet access. And so let me be clear, and be careful about it. What I mean here is, for firewall administrators, network administrators, anyone, getting IPv6 means that they need to understand it all. And I love that question, because that means you understood it, you got it, and that's where we are headed. This is the break-even point between attacks and defense. It's always the case. We need to have a tool for an attack, and we need to have a countermeasure spotted and see how we can defend ourselves. And this is so very interesting, because actually, if that guy finds and can then spot that all the flow comes from the IPv6 address, it can have the prefix blocking instead of ICDP. And yet we go through the same MAC address, right? MAC address. No, but the MAC address makes no difference here. Actually, it is always locally based or environment. Actually, we will see that now. And it'll be pretty clear. MAC address or MAC address doesn't make a difference. We will send in it from Kaylee and has an impact all the way down here, but there have other MAC addresses. We will see that later on, and it'll be pretty clear then. Let's move on. This is now listening in, see how we receive it. Is this right? Yes, I think so. Oh, can't see nothing here. Probably cannot capture it, but we can bring it, right? Bring it in. As long as we are not banned during this presentation, but we have another account just in case waiting for us. Naturally, not to ruin the destination machine, we've only sent 10 packets, but we can send many more. This is the traffic on our Kaylee. What are the IPv6 source addresses like? Right. The network address is just the same because that's the only one we can route to the internet that leads to the IPv4 on the internet, but the remaining 4 blocks on IPv6, which are the one that match the host, that is the addressing of our prefix, that's fully randomized. Destinations just the same, and it is all TCP SYN traffic, which means source is TCP. And it's sent to different ports, though. Here, what makes sense is using here, well, for the TCP layer, if we go back, no, this is the source port, right? Yes, port comes from I. Good, good. Actually, to make it more realistic, let's think this is a service we want to crash. We want to crash our web service. We just want to try it out. So this goes all to the HTTP port, and this here actually 80 changes here. It reaches, but you see the source IP is always different. Well, I've just shown you this to see that the traffic goes all the way down. There's no intermediate blocking that I can redirect it all, that I'm entitled because it's my own prefix. So it's reaching another element that it's listening in on IPv6 based internet. And just like this, go into a new concept, which is a SYN flat attack, existing attack, which is one of the most famous types of attacks when crashing a service, because it saturates the memory of the equipment or devices getting the connections. Usually, if it is poorly set up, that device will not know which connections are legit and which aren't, and so it crashes because the memory cannot bear it anymore. Next attack then? Next. Well, this is pretty similar, right? This is just the same, very, very similar. How can we set up a port scanner, TCP port scanner? I guess if you got SYN flat, you get this one. Well, we'll have a look. We will send it and implement it now, but Yet we wanted to have very simple scripts to encourage you so that you do the same. These are hacking tools. If you are up to date on IPv6 tools, you are familiar with THC and Hacker Choice, these are kits that are Kali based and are the ones that we all know when they say try to hack IPv6. Well, the Hacker Choice tools by Van Hauser. He is a genius and he's developed his own set of tools. I want to try it out. Well, if you use tunnelized tools, it doesn't work. I've tried it myself. But this is good because that way I've developed my own scripts and we can show you attacks in a most learning-focused way. That guy developing those tools that are very thorough has very simple attacks just like this, and that's all you get on the internet. And yet, within 10 minutes, we got to understand how by using 4 prompts we can do something similar, just tapping on the new features of IPv6. So if you're into security, if you're a technician, just read about it because it's much simpler than it looks like. So by using that slogan that we said before, that be the legion, another way we have to try and improve security for testing, well, what about having a TCP scanning starting in different ports each time? So whenever we have a TCP scanning in place, we always use a source IP address, can be inside or outside, and that's where we get the reply from one port to the next. We get all the replies and we see whether the port is open or closed. But what about doing so from different IP addresses every time? And as it's been discussed before, if we have an IDS, do you know what an IDS is? What's it? It is an intruder detection system that work based on traffic analysis. They look into meshes and flows and packets, and by interpreting those data, they can detect attacks real time. They can check out for malware or any kind of threat. Probably, I don't know if it's been included, but I guess that if you have the rules for IPv4 or standards for IPv4, you had a set of setups such as Snark, which is one of the best known sets, ready to detect attacks sent from the source IP address, which is great, right? It will detect that there is IPv4 based TCP scan attack, which is the previous stage before a most advanced attack. But what about we send a TCP SYN attack from different sources every time? Well, the destination machine might think it is legit because it's coming from different sources every time. And that's when we go back to the same topic. We need to go and look into our security and safety systems, our IDS addresses and our firewalls, to adjust it all to IPv6 because it's here. We see that it's internet traffic, that it's out there, and yet we are the ones that are security experts, and we need to get ready to be up to speed and understand what this is all about. Yes, let me open the script now. You know, it's all in color, that's good. So very complicated. You see how code is changed? Just a few nuances. You see the same function here. This is a random function. For the last 4 parts of our IP address, and then we add a loop. We add the source IP, we use our randomized concept, and next, oh, that was close. It works though. So we set a variable, we have an IPv6 packet, we set the destination, the source keeps changing for each iteration, and we add TCP. And this is one that changed before, right? Because it states 80. Or was it 80 before? Well, we choose the port we want to scan, and that port, that machine, number 18, will get connections from different IP addresses, which are within the machine, which means that we get a reply. And as you can see, between the SYN flat and TCP scan, more or less, it's all about the same. If you get one, you will get the other in a minute. Just change I. Change it to I. Good. Implement it? No, at TCP here. We are not getting the replies here. As for your question, yes, we'll see it now. Start with a ping, and yet we need to see whether those ports are open. 22? That's not open. Yeah, naturally. Then the reply. What about the reply? But we should have a reset, right? Yes, no, yes, no. Leave me alone. Yeah, Rafa's right here. Yes, we will get the replies. If you don't believe me, I will prove you wrong in a minute. He's upset now. Pick one. 53. 53. Increase range, or scope rather. Change it yourself. 16. Give me a minute. We should be getting it. Let's try and do something a bit more interesting, since before we saw that from the outside we had something else. Let us show you how long it takes. Let's move it all the way down here. You cannot copy it. Maybe... oh, damn it.
¿Alguien sabe lo que estoy haciendo?
Have you got any idea what I'm doing? But this is a different interface as well. Okay, let's try. So we'll try once, and otherwise we'll move on. So let's move on. And once we've seen all the attacks, we'll go back to this one, so that you do not get bored, because I'm getting confused with what's the source IP and the destination IP, but I can assure you that it does answer, and I'll tell you why. If this is my prefix 41, which it's not, and that's why I'm not getting it back, what Pablo has said about us being banned, it's true. And since we've had to open another account, we have another address. So there we are. Can you see that? It had to. Come on, those on the front rows. We know who you are. This is because of the net assist, because they have an infiltrated agent and they banned me this morning and it wasn't working. And why? Because I was doing this test yesterday, and that's why I knew it worked. So that's why I've changed the source IP, and that's why we didn't get them. So what's interesting about this is that we have point-to-point connectivity with the addressing /64 that I've told you about. This is a different source IP. It's a different port each time. If you look at the IP layer, 62. So I am less silent at nmap. I am not so clean, but it's going to be easy to do escaping as you do a random and then just go ahead. So with this machine was not listening, but the traffic has arrived, and this port, which is 53, the one that we've seen early on, has already done a SYNACECA, which is we would just need to include escape line, which is very simple, SR, send and resend, and because in Skype we're only sending traffic in one direction, but it's very smart, and if the destination answers, I'm gonna keep that packet and interpret it, so we will just have to wait for the answer packet, and if I receive the SYNACK, then there was a question. I've seen you wanted to ask something. Can we have the roaming mic, please? Just leave it with him. If the Linux machine is configured with the version 6, whatever, IP, and these packets go to other source directions, how are they listened to? Do you mean source directions or destination? But you're sending it with a random address. You mean the Kaylee, the one? Escape is a different layer from the operating system kernel. When you launch an application from your PC, using your kernel to initiate a TCP session, the kernel of the operating system says it's a syn TCP, and the kernel is handling the piles of status, etc. And if it gets the answer based on the right parameters, then it reacts, but Scape is different. It's an interpreted language and it's a script, and it works autonomously, and it handles the packets and builds it. It's just these ones and zeros, and it includes it in the RAM card, and it forgets about it. And if you say nothing else, the packet disappears and the kernel doesn't know nothing. In fact, this SYN ACK that we have received, the kernel should have answered and saying this doesn't belong to me. I don't know what you're saying, SYN ACK, so it will have to be an answer from our kernel. But you also know, by the way, that when we have to do SYN flood attacks, it's advisable to have a PT tables in your machine that you're launching the attack from to avoid the answers that you're receiving from the machine. But that's not my question. The question is, if your source IP is whatever, and these packets are being sent to a different IP source, even if it's within your network, they should not get to your machine because it's from the server machine to the other source machine that doesn't exist. But the range that you have is 64. So in that machine you can have that address is going to get to you. Oh, you're right. Your thinking's right. In a LAN switched environment in which it matches an IP, but this environment is slightly different. And why? Because this is encapsulated traffic. If you remember, encapsulated, yeah, that's the thing. Look at this, IPv4. In this traffic in the internet, and in fact for your kernel and for everything else is traffic IPv4, and we have jumped over that abstraction layer, but all the traffic is going on. Yes, if this was IP versus IP real, it would be impossible. It would get to the router, and then you could have a self DOS, because the router would ask through the internal network who has that IPv6 address. So it would send a neighbor discovery protocol asking who has this IP address, because I have this packet, and since there's nobody will answer. But that's the other attack that we're going to see, but remotely. But a very good question. So this is the next one, the last one. Up to you then. No. Well, first of all, the NDP. Do you know what NDP is? Does everybody know what the ARP protocol is? Well, this is equivalent to that. People are making good questions. In fact, there is a spoofing for NDP, and I'm sure you know the ARP spoofing. It has an equivalent here. So NDP is Neighbor Discovery Protocol, which is the protocol to discover your neighbors. It's a very sort of physical descriptive name. Would somebody dare to explain how it explained? That is, we have an external element, which, and this is not the attack, this is just a normal procedure as it should work. This is the external traffic from IPv6 towards one of the internal pieces of equipment. In this case, we have the internal network in our house, and in the future with that prefix 2001 CCC/DDD. And 3 pieces of equipment, one with the host address AAA, the second one BBB, and the third one CCC. And we get a packet from internet to the router, which is the entry point to the home network, and has the CCC/DDD1. It gets there. What's going to happen next? How is it going to communicate, and how will the router send the packet to the host be? It's easy. Just like in our ARP, it asks everybody. It sends a global cast packet with certain bits which are interpreted by all the hosts that are listening. And since this bits are broadcast, then it reaches everybody. And the only answer is from the piece of equipment that has this address, because operating systems are programmed so that there's only an answer if you have that configured address. Here we have the Mac pad, the Mac table of a router. The MAC table is a table that stays in the router that has all the IP addresses of internal IP addresses of all the computers that are connected. IP address and MAC. And the physical address. That's perfect, yeah. So it is a table that has internal router information so that each time another packet arrives to that IP address, knows where to send it. It will ask once, and when it gets that answer, that information will be stored. So the BBB is in that MAC address. Okay, I'll store that so that every packet that I receive, I don't have to ask all the time. This is a switched network. Otherwise, all of the packets will get to all the hosts, and that's not very safe, really. And it has a port as well, so that it knows what port to send it to. You mean that interface port? Yes. So the end result is this one, the 3 hosts with the 3 MAC addresses. But these addresses within the router, and the routers are usually pieces of equipment that are not very powerful. They are getting more and more powerful, but they have a limited memory and limited resources. NDP, I don't remember, but it has an equivalent in the IPv4, but in local network. You can saturate the MAC table of in an IPv4. And how can you do that? Doing it from the inside, which is how we were doing the attack so far, because we do it with internal addressing, which is which you can manage through the router, and you can send certain traffic saying that we are different IPv4 addresses in random ways, and we saturate it. But now with IPv6, since we've said that everything is public addressing, that attack can be performed from internet. And there's a change now. The destination address is random. In the previous attacks, in the TCP, TC scan, TCP SYN flood, the source address was random. But now, since the victim is also going to have a /64, we can also do that. Wait, wait for the microphone. I can't hear you otherwise. If we have the MAC table and using IP version 6, it would be an end-to-end connection, so the router wouldn't ask. Okay, but that's not related. Okay, but my point. If I have the IPv6 through the router, if I do an attack from the outside towards the router would be doing broadcast, will be looking for the MAC table, and the memory will be flooded. It would be making broadcast calls to find the IP address. Yes? Yes? A very good description. So you've done the work for me. Yes. That's very much the case. What's going to happen here is that for each one of the destination packets that I received, the router would say, okay, 111, and it's going to ask who has the 111. Nobody will answer in that case, and 222, and so on and so on. But the table will be filled because the routers are designed that way. So first they store in the table, and then when they get an answer, they fill it in. But first of all, they set up the register in the table, and they use the memory, even if they get no answer. And in fact, that MAC table is also in the final host. If you It doesn't need to be a router. Have you ever done this? This command here? It's very silly here because the LAN I have here, internet with the mobile phone, and that the computer is connected to has only one host. Unless you have broken the Wi-Fi that I have here, there's only this one associated host, and this is the ARP, and the concept is exactly the same as in the Kaylee, and it saves the MAC address of the router, and this is the IP address of the mobile phone. And why? Because you always need a MAC address. You always need a physical layer to address. The MAC table needs to be there. We have to pile up protocol by protocol, as we've said earlier on. But in the environment that we're working on, it's always needed. So this is the same concept. I haven't tried this, but if you launch it from outside, if you have address in here, the final host would also start filling its tables. Since right here it's IPv4. But wait, this is not native. Let's try it. We have not reviewed this script. No, we have not shown it. Let's see if it gets there. Not getting there. So let's look at the destination IP first of all, that it's right. We're just different generations, as I was saying. So we've been banned.
Bueno, os puedo asegurar que esto funciona.
So I can assure you this works, and if we've got there, what would have happened here in the MAC table? But this is done with a different command.
Este es el comando. El tema es ese. ¿Está diciendo que ya acabamos ya?
Is this the message that us we should finish?
Vale, aquí realmente.
So really, it is different. The source is different, but I don't know if it's necessary, because what matters is that the destination host is variable. So with the first 64 bits, it's all of these packages are always going to be routed to this machine, or that should be the case, because it is a ping reg. Should there be a ping behind? Because it's an ICMP, the router is going to say, I have to send this packet to my internal network, so I need to know the MAC address of the next jump, and I'm going to ask for it. So I send an MDP, as you've said earlier on. I add a register to the table, to the neighbor's table, and I wait. And if they answer, then I save it, and otherwise, etc. And that's how you can saturate it. And this is a new attack, and this one is no longer a concept change, but it's also related to what we said earlier on about whether the NAT is a safety measure or not. Well, that's a debate. NAT is not a firewall, it's not a safety measure, but you have to be clear that with the IPVS, the connectivity is point-to-point or end-to-end, and that's great. And having public IPs is fun. It's a lot of fun, but you have to take many safety issues into account, because otherwise you may run into trouble. So as sort of researchers in security, you have to really work at this. So we'll finish here because we've run out of time. Since questions have been asked during the presentation, if there is another question. Yeah, there's one there. Hello, thanks for the presentation. What you've told us about the channels and the possibility of having this public IP, it's interesting. You've mentioned that you do a VPS and you use a broker in the middle. We have different VPS. Couldn't you do the broker in your VPS without relying on third parties so that they can't ban us? To do it automatically, if we wanted to go out to internet with an IPv6 by default, but with traffic IPv4. So you want your PBS to transform it. Yes, I have in VPS some range /64, so to use them as though they were IPs of my router. Yes, of course, but you would have to set up your own tunnel broker. You would have to set up a process that receives a number of packets that identifies. Well, it's easy to identify, as we've seen earlier on, because in the header, in the IP header, you have identified that the following protocol is IP protocol, so you can identify that quickly and then implement all of the communication. But would you do that with IP tables or with software? Well, I don't know it, but I'm sure there are available softwares to set up your own channel broker, because it's not so simple. You need to unstack, and you have to know the address of the following, the MAC address of the following jump. Listen to the answers and see if the answers make sense for safety reasons, and then encapsulate the return. It's not as simple, but I'm sure there is a software that does that. And another question: if you do that through a broker like you've done it, from what I've seen, that you send packets with different IP sources, and then the broker sends all the answers. I understand that the whole range sends. The broker sends always the answers. Could I have set up sort of servers in several of those IPs version 6? Can my equipment be actively listening to several of those? Yes, something that we've done that's also fun, that the same interface can have different, many IPv6 addresses set up. So the first command that we've seen, the IPnet ADDR, which to add an address, you can repeat that with different IPv6 addresses, and that's the easiest way to have different addresses and services listening to each one of them, because you leave every service set up to configure to listen to the IPv6 that you want. So it's a lot more powerful, because the public addressing or routing is for free. There's plenty of it. So thanks very much to you for listening.